What I'd like to talk about today is a phenomenon that we've been looking at CoinFund called generalized mining. It's a property of decentralized networks. I encourage you guys to think about how decentralized insurance applications fit into this. Just really quick, what is CoinFund? We've been an investment firm since 2015, and our partners have been in the space well before that. We've got a team of 9 studying consensus, crypto economics, decentralized networks, and financial structures. Today we are backed by the team at Venrock, which is a big US-based, actually one of the oldest VC firms in the US. We consider ourselves full stack investors in the sense that we invest in protocols, but also middleware, but also decentralized applications, and also kind of more traditional, what we call key financial infrastructure companies that are working on custody, banking services, and secondary issuance. And this year, we're also active participants as a fund in decentralized networks. So to kick this off, I'd just like to talk about this concept of generalized mining and what the hell do I mean by that? Well, to understand this, you kind of have to look at decentralized networks and sort of imagine what the world looks like in the long term. And today, it's really easy to think about decentralized networks as startups. You have a bunch of VCs kind of slicing up tokens, just like they do with equity and supporting early stage teams. But in the long run, I think what happens is that decentralized networks proliferate, and not only that, they become specialized in different domains, and they also become kind of most interesting on public networks. And so they represent public goods or commons. When we thought about decentralized networks in 2015, this is what we sort of had. We had cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. We had asset issuance platforms like Counterparty, NXT, BitShares. And then, of course, Ethereum came along and kind of generalized that into smart contract platforms. But when we think about decentralized networks this year, we see a lot more stuff. We see resource networks that provide storage space and computation. We see content networks, even social media like Steemit, registries, like if you guys have heard of Handshake, that will kind of register DNS domains, and of course, what is in prog being called DeFi, or decentralized finance, which is a huge area of blockchain, and the one where decentralized insurance falls. And what's important to realize is that when you're running a decentralized public network, not only do you need participants, you need services to make them work. So while we think about these systems typically implementing marketplaces where you have customers and providers, there's also a little bit of a lower layer where you have this supply side, which is interacting with the protocol to make these networks run. And to give you some examples, think about Bitcoin, right? When we had Bitcoin and proof of work systems in general, life was pretty easy. We had miners and users. Miners process transactions in the network, and then users use the network. Everybody got paid in Bitcoin, and everyone's happy. When you go into proof of stake systems, miners become validators, still have users. Now you have this new concept called a delegator. Someone might be able to delegate tokens to nodes in the network and secure that network. And delegators don't have to be users. They can be investors. When you go into decentralized social media, you now have witnesses, which are the validators. You have people who are creating content. You have people who are curating content. And you actually now have bots that are curating content as well. So now there's at least 4 participants there. If you go into layer 2, state channels, there's a bunch of different infrastructure. It's a very cutting-edge space. You have hubs, watchers, routers. LivePeer is a decentralized network for video streaming and transcoding, that out of the gate has at least 6 participant types. And you can see this growing over time. And of course, when you get into decentralized finance, it's a little bit of a shift, but still, you need people to provide liquidity. You need people to lend assets. You need people to verify insurance claims. And these are all services provided to networks. These are the different kind of activities that these supply-side providers might engage in. And if you wanted to summarize, decentralized networks in their general form need hardware to provision them, they need software to secure them, they need stakeholders and token holders to govern them, and a long list of supply-side services to enable them to function in a trustless and distributed manner inside of their domain. And this is what I call generalized mining. Other people have called it mining 2.0, supply-side services, I like this term. And if you wanted to define it quickly, I define it as any supply-side service provided by a third party to a decentralized network in exchange for compensation allocated by the network. So that might be on-protocol compensation, it might be alpha, it might be customers paying for certain services. And this creates a new set of opportunities, which is a third-party economy. It's a totally open market available to institutions, investors, players, users, who are all providing these services and have the ability to earn a return. How do we make sense of it? Well, as I mentioned, actually there's opportunities that are really hardware intensive, there are opportunities that are really software intensive, and this, while an oversimplification, kind of allows one to make a little bit of sense in it. And so if you look at this side of the graph, this is where the traditional POW, proof of work miners would be. They have $100 million data centers doing mining. Here you have a bunch of staking algorithms. I think this area gets pretty commoditized over time. And today you have a set of maybe like 50 companies going out to create the ability to easily stake assets or run nodes. And this is especially important for funds and institutions and anyone holding tokens, because if you're holding tokens but you're not putting them to use for their domain-specific purpose, then you're foregoing free returns. And then here on this side, you have more software-oriented services. And this is really where, a lot of the really interesting stuff happens, because this is the proprietary software side of the market. Here you're competing on how smart you are, and in staking you're competing on how efficient you are, and then in hardware you're competing on whether you have $100 million to run a data center. And the way that this is posed to develop is that classical miners right now are taking their data centers and they're kind of looking a little bit into the staking opportunity and repurposing their hardware for GPU mining on LivePeer, for example. And staking companies are trying to get really efficient and have one-click services where they go out and people can stake and they take a little bit of a commission on that as a business model. And then in the software side, you have quants, a totally underserved market in kind of blockchain funds today, and crypto funds, and I think we'll see a lot more of that. And as companies come in with domain expertise, I think more and more of them will be on that side. So that's what generalized mining is. How does this fit in with you guys? Well, I would say institutions in particular have good reasons to actively participate in decentralized networks. For one, they have a very efficient way of accessing these kinds of returns in their domain, and also additional kinds of returns that are available on these networks. There's a high level of automation. These are all on-protocol business opportunities, so you hook up your technology to these markets, and you can get going. For insurance markets and lending markets and decentralized finance, it's incredibly important to have liquidity and liquid markets, and institutions are in a very good position to provide that liquidity for these markets. Domain expertise, who can evaluate insurance claims or, for that matter, fixed income opportunities or anything else other than the companies that have been working on this for many years. Decentralized insurance networks are marketplaces, typically, not always, but they definitely have generalized mining opportunities in the sense of liquidity provision and being able to provide a return stream based on these products, but also on the protocol levels where staking and tokens are used to provide security to these public networks. So I encourage you guys to think about, as you're looking at decentralized insurance and creating projects, staking in 2018 is very much in, and payment tokens, that's 2017, that's very much out. But I encourage you to think about what are the token models that are compatible with this kind of opportunity, because when you create these opportunities, you create an ability to bootstrap these new networks. And talk to Renat about that. He's done a bunch of work on how that works. And then, of course, supply side is there to bootstrap liquidity and these specific services that we mentioned. So some examples might be earning ROI by providing network security and staking models that we mentioned. Market making for tokenized insurance assets or marketplaces. It might be bootstrapping, capitalizing, or providing liquidity to a network in exchange for native assets that you can then use as a return stream. And so in conclusion, it really feels these days like decentralized networks might take over the world in a couple of years across all kinds of different domains. Institutions and funds are well positioned to add a lot of value to those networks, to help create them, to help maintain them, and to earn a return from them. And if you're holding tokens, participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. Very inspirational. We will take your words and try to implement it in our next version of our own token model. Do we have any questions from the audience for Jake? Anyone wants to take this opportunity? Yes, please.
What do you think on investment 2.0 for decentralized systems such as ICO 2.0 or some other kind of next generation system, investing system?
So this year we've seen a lot of kind of thinking, especially from crypto funds, around like what does it mean to be a crypto native investor in blockchain? Does that mean investing in equity? Does that mean investing in ICO? Or does that mean actively participating in these networks? To me, it's all of those things. You have to choose the exposure to a particular opportunity correctly. But it's really awesome to see funds being active participants. And here's why. It forces funds to be more technological. It adds very measurable value. Like if I'm an investor, I say I'm adding value to a project. I can actually measure. I can say I expanded the liquidity throughput of a certain layer 2 by putting in some ether into that network. And it helps these projects succeed. Most funds are long-term focused investors. They can take, for example, a loss now to build network effect of a network to have it succeed in the long term. Miners are not in a position to do that. They have to liquidate in order to maintain kind of their capital flows. Speculators are usually not interested in that, right? But funds and institutions are well positioned to actually bring a lot of value.
Does that answer your question? Thank you so much, Jake. Please give a round of applause for Jake.